what was the reason for starting this particular company?
If you panic, you will have the worst outcome.
What do you think is a question that maybe you're not asking yourself right now?
I'm driven by impact, but also driven by how interesting every day is.
How did you overcome all the fears and self-doubt to actually make this transition and start this company?
If I don't do it now, I never do it. Let's jump.
How do you inject more energy into that team to help them get across the finish line? Welcome to Mork Unfiltered, folks. My guest today is not your typical tech founder. Julien Belliato is a mountain scaling, systems thinking, sustainability obsessed engineer who's quietly helping to electrify Europe, one charging station at a time. He's the co-founder and deputy CEO of Electra, a French EV charging startup that's raised over €1 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Is it like some crazy amount like that? It's like, wow, okay. And built a network of over 3,200 charge points across 9 countries in just 4 years, which is pretty insane. But what makes Julien even more interesting isn't just the scale of what these guys are building, it's how grounded he stays while doing it. With deep experience in infrastructure, energy, and purpose-driven business, he's one of these rare blends of operational rigor and environmental conviction. Today, we're going to dive into the messy middle of the journey, the setbacks, the fears, the rituals, the things that have kept him centered as they've been scaling this amazing company. And as well as some of maybe, if he's willing to share it with us, unpopular opinions that he might hold about the whole, clean tech movement and EV and all that good stuff. So let's dive into it. Julien, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Patrick. What a great intro. Thanks for giving me the mic. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much for being here. It's really exciting for me. I'm a huge EV fan, and actually I'm half Norwegian. And as you know, Norway is like one of those crazy countries in terms of EV penetration. And it seems like everybody in Norway drives an electric vehicle, which is so cool. So as we dive in, take us back to the early days of Electra. And, what was the reason for starting this particular company? What was what was the reason for getting started? And what's the purpose of Electra as an EV company?
Yeah, okay. Thanks for starting with that. It's super important. Maybe just a couple of words about my background quickly, because it connects pretty well to why I co-founded Electra. I mean, I'm an engineer, I'm French, and I worked almost exclusively actually in energy and infrastructure. I like, let's say, impact, energy transition, and let's say tangible stuff. So tech is good, but tech for tangible stuff and impact, right? And then if I wanted to, at some point in my career, after the MBA at INSEAD, I did in 2017, I wanted to go into this direction, energy, infrastructure, tangible stuff. I like it. I like the impact. I'm driven by it. But I want to combine it with shorter business cycles, innovation, software, like an ecosystem where it's buzzing. You have like plenty of interesting people thinking about the future. And at the time, so it was 2020, basically, 2019. If you want to combine, these two worlds, it's still the case today, of course, but it was earlier at that time, so it was even more the case. EV charging showed up as a super interesting sector. So that's the connection with my background, and then the deeper reasons why I wanted to co-found Electra and develop a good charging system in Europe. You have a couple of chapters behind it. One is impact. I mentioned it, right?
Yeah. I'm
pretty sure you will have questions about CO2 and other environmental impacts of electric cars, so I can keep that for later. But one is impact.
Yeah.
One is, let's say, European energy sovereignty, right? We don't really have oil. There is a little bit, but at some point there won't be oil anymore in Europe because we import it. Resources are scarce, so at some point we won't be able to import it at all. And if we run on oil, we will have some issues to move around. I will be very happy to be able to live as I live today, especially driving. Electrification is needed for many reasons. Impact, energy sovereignty. And then also why starting a company? That's part of the answer, right? That was, a little bit, I don't know if it's late or not, but I was 35, 36. I realized that one of my motivation is really, intensity of every day. So my motivation is adventure. Like I want to live interesting stuff. I'm driven by impact, but also driven by how interesting every days are. And the MBA was super intense and creating a company.
I remember.
new topics, new things to crack is definitely a very strong driver for me. And can I ask you a question? You said
Sure,
that
of
you were
course.
an EV driver. So how long have you been driving one then?
So you're going to laugh when I tell you, but actually, I own an electric scooter.
An electric scooter. Okay, that's a difference. It was good already.
So it's EV. It's EV. Like I live in Miami Beach, and there's no need for me to own a car, and so I
Okay.
don't. I like literally when I need to own a car, I use a very cool app called Turo, and most of the time, unless I want something fast and fancy, which once in a while I do, most of the time I'll get an EV. I'll get a Tesla, just
Yeah,
because
sure.
I really enjoy doing them, and then
And
it's
the basic
electric.
question is how do you like it? Like beyond impact and beyond everything, how do you like to drive an electric car compared to a classic car in terms of user experience?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, to be honest, like I'll never forget the first time I rented an EV was actually in Santiago, Chile. I was there visiting my daughter, and you rented a car, and it was an EV. I don't know if it was a Hyundai or something else, but I was blown away by how smooth it was, by how quiet it was, by how easy the whole charging process was. I was blown away as somebody who loves to drive, even though I don't own a car right now. I was blown away by the acceleration of this
Exactly.
car.
And the
Well,
sound
it's
and
like,
technology and
yeah,
automation.
it's exactly. It's such a good experience, and I know people worry about like, oh my god, am I going to run out of charge? And they have all these existential questions, which I had too the first time I drove it, but I've only had positive experience with EVs.
Exactly. I mean,
Nothing but
thanks
positive
for
experiences.
that's helping me a lot. Thank you, Patrick. And that's one of the other reasons, which is actually it is very cool as a driver
It
to
is.
drive electric cars and to unlock. That's the last part of my answer. It's a long answer, but I think important because it's think about it every day is if you want to really have great cars, it's already around the corner. I mean, it's been for in some cases already here. You need two things. Let's say better batteries and good
Yep.
charging.
Exactly.
And I decided to crack with my co-founder the charging case. I mean, we decided to try to crack the charging case. And basically, we are convinced, and I think reality is happening now, that if you want to crack it, sorry, you need the best of infrastructure and also the best of software and technology. So
Yes.
tech for good, in a way. These vehicles are so connected that if you only
Mhm.
think good chargers there, that's it. It's not enough. You need good user experience. You need to be super smooth, simple, reliable, except you mentioned the company, except maybe Tesla, that's
Yeah.
famous to combine very well hardware and software. All other actors, they are being usually more traditional actors, like infrastructure
Hmm.
energy actors. So I'm not saying
Right.
they're doing a bad job. They are doing a good job, but they don't have this combination of DNA culture. And we
Yeah.
thought that there is a space for a new champion that is a pure player around charging because charging needs to combine both DNAs. Let's take the
Yeah.
space. And it was pretty daunting because you're going against, the energy giants. And I think that also got us super excited about the project.
Yeah, there's nothing like going against incumbents, to get your blood pumping, especially if you feel that there are ways that seem obvious to consumers that you can do such a better job. One of the things I like about you guys
Exactly.
is I know that there was some news that you put out about a month ago, about the latest charging stations that you had, and it was like the first charging stations that I saw that were actually like really stylish. You guys put a
Thank you
lot
for
of
that.
emphasis
Super
on
appreciate it.
design. It's really, really cool. I was like, I looked at like, how you guys have really put a lot of emphasis on crafting and designing these things. And most people don't do that. And these actually look rather quirky and fun and attractive. So that's cool.
Exactly.
But tell me, I
Thanks.
mean, what was the aha moment for you when you realized that, charging stations across Europe, faster charging stations, which I understand is one of your points of difference, that this wasn't just a cool idea and a market opportunity, but was really kind of like your mission and the way that you were going to impact the world.
Yeah, understood. I think the moment was really when I met my co-founder at the very beginning because, we described Electra as a fast charging, operator for cars, but there are some specificities actually. And one thing that we focus on that was really something that showed up in the first reflections was basically you have actors taking care
Yeah.
of fast charging on highways
Right.
at the time and still today. And you have actors taking care of public charging in cities, but they are slow chargers.
Right. Right.
And nobody's taking care of fast chargers in cities and urban areas.
Right.
And it's actually super hard to crack because locations are hard to find, because it's a high risk, high reward play, because any competitor can be around, even though a location is hard to find, because you have plenty of use cases to crack. Can you imagine, for example, we are the only one to provide booking system, but booking system on highway doesn't make any sense. But around cities, if you think about taxis, Uber drivers, it makes a lot of sense, but it brings a lot of complexities. And I can go on and on with many examples of use cases to crack. And at the time, I was one of the early adopters. I had an EV already, and I was living in Paris. And every time I wanted to charge the car in Paris, I was trying to plug it to the slow chargers in the streets of Paris at the time. Either it wasn't working, or I was trying to plug on the 3 kilowatt home socket.
Yeah.
Almost every time I was coming back, there was a scooter, another scooter with a multi socket. It's like, oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
If you crack this thing with fast charging, that means whether you're a professional or a private driver, if you go to the charging station instead of the gas station once in a while, it's super simple, and simplicity matters. You don't want to have to think about, hey, I will charge 2 hours here, and then tomorrow when I go to the butcher, I will take 2 more %, and then the day after I need to check if there's a plug. No, it has to be simple, and fast charging is everywhere, including in cities, is a way to bring simplicity to users. And focusing on this segment is something that we have been doing. We do a little bit more because we want network effects, but the main focus is urban, peri-urban. And so when we had this 2-hour workshop about urban fast charging, we had this aha moment. For example, the good tech is super necessary and allows to leverage. The best tech is enabling the use cases I was describing. On highways, it has to work. Okay. Basically, the use case is you arrive, you park, you plug, and you go. In cities, it's much more complex. So you have to develop a more sophisticated, yet simple product. And the main enabling thing we need to do is tech. And you need to be a tech and infra player. And that was really a aha moment at the beginning.
Okay. When you look at customer feedback in Europe and in France, is the speed of charging the main reason not more people drive EVs, or what are the main reasons people are not adopting EVs en masse? And I know if you look at Europe, obviously it's very, as everything, right? It's very fragmented. You have countries like Norway that have 90% penetration of EVs, and then you have other countries where the penetration is less than 20%. What are the main things that are holding people back from buying electric vehicles?
I mean, it's a very interesting question. I think the OEM lobbies have been working super hard. I don't know. That's what I think, but I don't know.
Okay.
Because it's very hard to switch from internal combustion engine or PHEV factories to electric factories. So there is interest. And actually the image of EVs is basically bad. Everyone that drives an EV except, the one that picked the wrong car because it was an old model, like it.
Yeah.
But then the arguments that are used are one, a price.
Yeah.
Which is maybe still true. I mean, if you compare, if you look at the high-end cars, let's say 50K something, an EV is not more expensive. It's the same price. Yet it is a big car, and in France we like small cars, and in the smaller cars it's still more expensive. So it's coming. So that's true. Okay. Then you have autonomy or range. Right? Which used to be true, and which is really a lot less true, especially because of the third fear, which is there's no chargers. And in France, at least, I don't have all the figures for the rest of Europe, but it's similar actually. The number of public fast chargers was multiplied by 7 in 2 years.
Wow.
What people were saying 2 years ago, if you don't have a car, you don't know. If you don't have an electric car.
Yeah,
but it changed so fast that it's actually not true at all. You have plenty of fast chargers everywhere in France, in Belgium, in all countries. And the beauty of it is that if you have a car that is, a limited size battery, let's say 400 kilometers, to be honest, people sometimes say, I like to drive 1,000 kilometers without stopping. Yeah, okay, crazy people. But otherwise, you stop.
There's not a lot of people who do that. Right? I mean, if you're a truck driver, you do that.
Exactly. For a truck driver, it's different. But then you stop, for a coffee and go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I charge from 10 to 70 to 80% in 15 minutes. So usually it's even too fast. And so if you have not too big battery, that means the car is lighter, it's not too expensive. And if you charge fast, it's not a problem, right? But if I summarize today, still the global, the studies show that the arguments used are price, range,
Right.
charging. The other
Okay.
things, but they are
Price,
the main
range,
ones.
and charging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to my father. Just bought an Audi. He's a big Audi fan. He just bought an Audi S8. And I remember I asked him, I was like, "Why don't you get an
Electric.
EV? Like, why don't you get like a why
Mhm.
don't you get an electric Audi?" And he was like, his arguments were the same as yours. He was like, "Oh, like I don't want to like find myself, running out of battery and stuff." Obviously, I think in many cases, folks that are older are a little bit more conservative when it comes to making
Yeah,
those kind of life changes in anything, not just what kind of car do I buy or should I stick to, combustion engine or electric. But that was his main reason. And I can understand that too. I once rented a Tesla and I had to drive from Miami to Tampa and I mapped out the route. And then I got to the charging station and I didn't have the adapter.
that's a
So I
problem.
couldn't charge at that station. And so, I had to kind of like drive on and I did eventually run out of battery. I mean, like I pulled into like another station where I stole a plug from like the guy's bathroom. I like plugged in my car there.
Good
But
trick.
there, of course, it's a good trick. The guy was pretty pissed when he found out. But that was a not so good
Yeah.
experience, and so I can understand where things like that can scare people. And to the
And
extent that as you talked about, to the extent that you make it simpler and easier and faster, all those things make a massive difference.
exactly. And also I understand, I don't know the US market very well, but I understand the quality of the network is one of the rare cases, but the quality of the charging network is behind Europe's actually. So
And they
the
are way
situation
behind.
you were describing, for example, in
Yeah,
Europe, it's only CCS2, so you don't have an adapter because always the same thing. And it's much
exactly.
denser, the country is smaller, so it's different today.
Yeah, the U.S. is still, I would say, hopelessly behind in terms of electric vehicles.
Mm.
In Miami, the number of Teslas are crazy, but once you leave the bigger cities, you just see a lot less of them. So, I'm confident that it will come. Like I've said, my experiences have been generally nothing but positive, and I think that if I was to buy a car, that's really what I would buy. But I want to switch gears a little bit because I want to
Yeah,
talk about something that is not often talked about in the world of startups, and something which I'm sure you guys, maybe you and your founders have experienced, which is when I was at the Volcano Summit here, which is like the South by Southwest in Central America, where they asked me to do the closing keynote for the event. And one of the things I asked people in the audience, I said, "How many of you in the audience right now want to start a company?"
mhm.
And a lot of hands kind of like shot up in the audience, right? Because it was not just entrepreneurs; it was aspiring entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
And my question was like, well, why are you not starting your company? I was like, how many people here want to start a company? A lot, all these hands. How many of you are actually starting your company? A lot less hands. And one of the things that we see in human nature is that human beings are averse to change. Like we all struggle with making significant changes in our lives, right? Whether it's leaving the country that you live in, to go live somewhere else. You've lived all over the place. You spent time in Singapore when you were in INSEAD. You've traveled all over the world. You've done a lot of interesting things. Well, for a lot of people, leaving their city or their neighborhood is like risky. It's like, oh my God, how I do it. And for most people, that they have these dreams of being an entrepreneur. It's like most people will never do it. So I was curious, when you had to make that jump and you decided, with I think Aurélien is his name,
exactly.
or to start Electra, how did you overcome all the fears and self-doubt to actually make this transition and start this company?
Yeah, it's a great question. Think I think I was thinking about it for a long time. And one of the
Hmm.
reasons why, I wanted to disrupt. I mean, some people would
Hmm.
say, if you want to start a company, don't go for MBA, but I don't agree. Like, you have plenty of ways. Oh, and everybody has a different, development. And for me, it was a trigger. Like, it was okay. I think it was even harder for me to leave. I was living in Canada for working for Veolia. I was very comfortable, North American salaries compared to my friends. I know my project by heart. it's an easy life and no traffic
Yeah.
jams. You can do mountain biking every weekend, but I got bored at some point. But it was hard to leave comfort. And then,
Yeah. You were in your comfort zone. Exactly.
exactly. And you leave it and you spend basically 100K for the MBA and you have no idea, if you're going to be happier later. And I think it was even harder, but it was like the beginning of the change, right? And then I was looking for opportunities, the right sector, something that drives me, right? Because what I was doing at Veolia was interesting for a while, but I wasn't passionate about it. Then I did a bit of consulting that was good training, but I wasn't passionate about it. Then I joined an EV charging company. Before co-founding Electra, I didn't stay very long. But then here, there are many things I didn't like that happens. But at least I sort of fell in love with the topic, the sector, the mission.
Okay.
It felt like, I have the will to do it. I don't want to create a company for the sake of creating a company. I want to have impact. I want to make sure in the morning when I wake up, I have the fire, right? And so I like the sector. And then the last piece that was missing is meeting the right people, because you don't want to do it alone, and you want to make sure you find someone that brings something that you don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met Aurélien, he was actually great. I mean, I had experience, in industry, even charging, infrastructure. I have this robustness linked to this sector. And Aurélien is actually a serial entrepreneur. He had already built a company before called Cheers.
Okay.
Photo printing app in Paris.
Yep.
I didn't have the network in Paris because I was abroad. So he can bring, a network plus, let's say, the tech mindset that he had with the photo printing app.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go. You have the right DNA. It was really let's say, a professional crush when we met. So I thought, okay, I'm 36 at the time, so not that young. Well, no kids. That might be an important thing.
That helps.
To be less afraid. I have the right co-founder, the right topic I love. If I don't do it now, I never do it. Let's jump. Worst case, if it fails, I will, or maybe not be, I will burn money, but that's, in a way, I realize, this value I like to have in my life, which is adventure and intensity.
Yeah.
Money is done for that, right? I didn't go to Inside to be richer in terms of money. Right. I went there to live something interesting that enriches me. And I thought, worst case, I will be enriched for sure. Anyway.
Right. Interesting. So if I'm understanding you well, if I'm understanding you correctly, there, one of the things that you're saying that I think it's important for the audience is, it sounds like you looked at it from several different points of view, right? There's this idea of impact, right? Something that really drives you and that you're excited about. There's this idea of adventure and excitement for sure. Get plenty of excitement in startups. There's, I think you raise a very important point, which is important for our listeners to remember, which is not to do things alone, right? I think there's a belief, which I believe is a mistaken belief today, that because of AI, everybody can go out and be a sole founder, and that they can just sit there and code on their own and they can build a company without any kind of human contact, right? And I don't buy that personally. I think it's bullshit. I think you can do it, but I don't think you can build a great long-term company, because building a company is it's like running a marathon. It's not about starting the company. It's about, staying with it until the end.
And especially for me, first of all, I wouldn't do it because I don't think it's the best way to have success. But also, it's not the best way to live an adventure.
I agree.
So
I agree.
I wouldn't do it. Maybe I would use AI, but I wouldn't do it alone. And by the way, I was a bit quick in the description, because that's really the main points. But something important is that we were even three at the beginning. Should have mentioned it.
Right.
And then the third founder left to build, by the way, a battery company.
Okay.
At some point, he wanted to do something else, and he left. But he got us connected, and then he was much younger. So in a way, I thought really what was aligned is really Aurélien and myself, and I loved working with Augustin, and I think it's super important as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And he's very strong because he started a company like 4 months after. Again, he found he found good co-founders. So. Super important skill to be able to be surrounded by the right people. The most important thing, actually.
You mentioned something very interesting about Aurélien, which I like, and I want to drill down on that a little bit, is the importance of finding a co-founder that complements your skill set. So ideally is really good at the things that maybe you're not necessarily that good at, right? He had the connections in Paris, which you didn't. he had the previous experience of having done a startup, which you didn't. You had the infrastructure experience, you had the charging sector experience. How do you go about finding a founder that shares the same values and the same reason for doing the company that you do?
Aurélien and Augustin are the two only ones I met. Meaning, I think I was sort of lucky on that front.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
guess I felt after 1 hour of conversation that he was working. So how
Okay.
do you do? Actually, I don't have a recipe, but it's true that even today, it's super important that, for example, the reason why the co-founders do the company at Electra is not like, you find locations, you build a network and you sell it to another company
Yeah.
to be rich and go on holiday. No.
Yeah.
We want to have an impact. We want to build something that on the long term, and we're very aligned on that. And I guess
Okay.
what's important is to get to know each other, to discuss the vision, to check a little bit what will happen in difficult situations. We did that, but I mean, it went super fast, to be honest. I think the chemistry worked very easily in our case, and that's part of the key success factor so far. Definitely.
Yeah, chemistry is definitely important. I mean, let's dive into that last comment of yours, right? So when things get hard, right? When things are not working out, maybe you guys have raised an enormous amount of venture capital. You've raised, I think, several rounds. Well over 700 million euros or something crazy. But when things are a struggle, right? When things feel like they could fall apart, how do you stay grounded? Like, what are your rituals? What are your habits? What keeps you going when things really get hard?
You mentioned, I mean, in couple of chapters of the answer, but the first one is really for me. You mentioned at the beginning that I am into outdoors and mountains. It's
Yeah,
true.
I was stalking you on Facebook.
Yeah, well done, well done. And I'm not like a high level alpinist, but I do like rock climbing and like sometimes quite tough things, right? When you think like if you miss the rock here, you just die. And that puts things into perspective.
Okay.
Me. That means,
Yeah.
okay, it's challenging. There's a lot at stake. There are jobs, there's a mission, there's my life, but I won't die and nobody will. It's business. And then anyway, another example linked to the mountain. If you're a mountain guide, which I'm not, but maybe in another life, if you know the situation is hard, difficult, I don't know, storm is coming or like, I don't know, something bad is coming, couple of situations. If you panic, you will have the worst outcome. If you stay calm, focused on action, you will have the best outcome. So I think this is really this the mountain world that puts things into perspective. And for me, it's like focus on actions to get the best outcome. And worst case, it's going to be challenging, but it's going to be interesting and you won't die. I mean, that's really simple, but I think the connection to
Okay.
the mountain and the outdoors is really helping me. And then in the co-founders relationship, it's really communication,
Right.
understanding each other's emotions in a way, it's like for anxiety linked to environment.
Yeah.
One way to feel less anxious is to be active.
Right.
So same thing
Gotcha.
here. Be active. Solution, move on. Be in movement.
Right.
Be
Exactly.
creative. An entrepreneur needs to always take initiatives. I mean, the role is to crack problems. So if you have challenges, great. That's part of the game.
So just for our audience here, just to summarize, what I'm hearing here is on the one hand, constantly be in action, right? It's like
Yes.
there's so many people, and I was always critical about this at INSEAD, and I think with many MBA programs, MBAs sometimes get accused of being, in paralysis analysis, right? It's like you overanalyze things so much because you're so freaking intelligent that you end up getting stuck and you don't make a decision. And so what I hear from you is constantly be making decisions, even potentially if it's the wrong decision, you'll just learn from it and you'll move on, right? On the one hand.
Exactly.
The other thing I heard from you, which I've heard many times before, and this was actually pillar number 2 of my 5 pillars of resilience when I talk to people about becoming unstoppable, is to do hard things. It's like scaling mountains and trekking volcanoes is not easy, right? It requires a certain kind of mindset. And I think one of the things that I liked about, kind of like studying and learning about you from a distance was you're a person that, like, once you realize you're in your comfort zone, you intensely step out of that comfort zone and you try new things that are hard and challenging because you know that you're going to learn from it.
Exactly.
Right. Which leads me a little bit to the third thing that you said, which I think, again, is really important for our audience, is to kind of reframe this idea of failure. Like what I found is so different from Europe versus the US is that in the US, it's kind of like the culture here, not say the US culture is better. There's things I absolutely don't like about the US, just to be clear. But in the US, one of the things I do like is if you talk to people in Silicon Valley or New York or LA who are doing startups and it's hard and we all struggle and we all hate it and we all have, pulling our hair out of our head and losing hair and all that good stuff. There is a perception that failure is simply part of the journey. There is not a negative perception around failure the way you have in many countries in Europe. In Europe, I got the feeling that if you failed, people are like, oh my God, I'll never talk to you again. You'll never get another bank loan. Your parents will disinherit you. Your friends will laugh at you and it's game over.
I think you're right, but maybe it's a little bit exaggerated.
Maybe. Could be. I haven't lived in Europe in like 10 years, so it's probably changed somewhat. But
it's true that in my case, I don't know if it's exposure to North America and the MBA and the step back and but I mean, I don't know. It hasn't happened. So yet I hope it will never happen. But if it was failing, I think I wouldn't. I mean, there's so much you take out of it that you bounce back to something new without a problem. Like people who say, you're a failure, you don't want them in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Not in your neighborhood, but in your life. So you just, move on with good people. And I think there are a lot even in Europe. I mean, good people.
They're amazing people. They're amazing people. There are amazing people all over the world. I mean, I just spent 4 days in Guatemala and I saw like a whole bunch of startup pitches and talked to amazing companies that are scaling quite quickly and doing crazy things. And and they all have that DNA of wanting to do impact and wanting to do good and doing hard things. Can you share with us a little bit a personal or maybe a business or career setback, something that did not go according to plan? And what you learned from that and why potentially that setback may have been more valuable to you than any win that you've had.
Hospital project I worked on in Canada, in Montreal, called Lucium.
Yeah.
And actually, the project is like 2.5 billion euro, 10 years. And then we knew that there was delay. And one day of delay because of loan payments is 400,000 euros or dollars.
Wow. Yeah.
And there was no way we could catch up. No way. And and then why? Because it's such a complex project. And then we had to leave for 2 years with this situation. And in the end, the project, there were some penalties, but the project in the end is a super big success, a world-renowned hospital, and that's part of the project. And today at Electra, we have plenty of operational problems. I don't know, grid connections that take forever, and people who haven't had this experience, they don't have the same resilience. They don't have the same power, same will. And I think that was super helpful for me. I don't know if that's a good example.
Okay. No, I think it's a good example. I think it's a good example. I think the question is more like, okay, you guys were behind, you were facing all these penalties. What did you learn from that experience? I think that's really the question. Like what was a situation that was really difficult that potentially was not a success as you were going through it, it ended up being a success. But in the meantime, what did you learn from that might have changed the way you operate today?
I'm thinking of a situation. So I wouldn't say it's a failure, but it was a professional difficulty that taught me a lot of things in terms of behaviors that are super helpful on a daily basis now. The situation was when I was working in Canada, in Montreal, on the hospital project, that there was a delay, like a 1 year delay or something like that, very long delay. And anyway, we had to pay like hundreds of thousands of dollars of penalty every day, right? And you either live with that, being desperate and like you lose energy and you're not focusing on action, or you are resilient, and you focus on solutions. You try to accelerate, you find better ways on every day for 3 years before the delay of the project kicks in. And in the end, the project, was late anyway. So there was some penalties that were negotiated, but thanks to the crazy amount of work that was put into place every day with the right mindset, resilience, we will do it. The project became internationally renowned, big success, and today, this kind of experience in terms of long-term resilience on very complex project is super helpful to have this resilience. Like we have projects that take forever because of I don't know, grid connections, permitting, and I was talking about the two types of DNAs, tech and infra,
Right.
and it's quite hard
Yeah.
in a startup scale up, based in all the capitals in Europe with this fun startup scale up mindset with fancy offices, which is very good.
Yep.
But at the same time, you're doing infrastructure and you're on the ground, and like you don't have your cables to get electricity, and like how do you combine these two mindsets? And one of the things is really resilience, and how you keep your people motivated, because if you're not, it will just never happen. That's, to be honest, an experience that really is impactful today in the way we operate at Electra, I think.
Right. I always say how for many people, fear is the reason that they don't get started, in terms of starting a company or making a big change in their life.
Yeah,
But resilience is the thing that determines whether they finish,
exactly.
right? Because you can get started. You can find the courage, you can start that company, you can leave your city, you can start learning a new language, you can apply for the MBA, right? But if you don't have the resilience, you oftentimes you don't have, and I'm going to use a car analogy, right? You don't have
Perfect.
enough energy in the battery to finish,
Yes,
right? So,
exactly.
so dig a little bit deeper there in your experience, Julien. You talked about motivating people. How do you motivate a team that is running on empty, where the battery is running low? How do you inject more energy into that team to help them get across the finish line? What's worked for you?
And I think that's a big part of a founder's job. And I love that
Yeah.
part. Um,
Yeah.
I think there are plenty of things. First of all, I think explaining the why we do things, the mission. At Electra, we're
Yeah.
fortunate
Love it.
enough to work on something that has impacts. I gave the explanation in the introduction, and it's super important for everyone at Electra at all levels to understand where we're going,
Mm-hmm.
why,
Yep.
what the plan is. So I think it's the why, and it's also give long-term vision. Why we do things, why we open a country, why we do a fast charging only, why, explaining the vision, right? That's one part. That's a super important thing. And I think we have, good routines with team meetings every Monday with the whole company to share all the news of the company and remind the why. And I think it's super important. Then the next one is build a very strong company culture around values. And very early on, we decided with Aurélien and Augustin at the time, the values we want to embody in the company and we want to nurture and transmit. One is passion,
Mm-hmm.
one is boldness, and the last one is
Yep.
simplicity.
Okay.
And this is creating creating like a company personality, and that's attracting specific people. And passion, I think, is super important. And we can afford it in a way because the topic is super interesting, the impact is interesting. And if you look at it from far away, you could think, okay, it's big cables and big sockets to charge cars, but it's actually, real estate, energy, technology, sovereignty. It's deep, it's interesting. So you have impact and it's interesting.
How do you actually go about in your startup, right? In every startup, that I've coached goes through this problem, right? Is like, you get the product off the ground, growth starts to come, money pours in the door, all of a sudden you're scaling like crazy, you have to hire a whole bunch of people. How do you ensure that the people that you hire when you're going through that level of growth are aligned with the purpose and the values of the company?
Very good question. We grew from 3 co-founders to 300 people in 3.5, 4 years. So it's fast actually especially for an infrastructure company. I think key thing, once you have your core team, so it's founders and the executive committee, and we're very close, right? We meet 2 hours every week. So
Okay.
for executive committee people, it's not too much a challenge because, they've been carefully selected and we create the
Right.
vision together, right?
Right.
And then once you have this core team that is really aligned on the values and the ways of working, you need to make
Mm-hmm.
sure you create another level of high-level managers that are nurtured the right way. And that's not just, telling them, this is our values. It's behaving with the right level of exemplarity for us,
Right.
teaching them to do the same, giving feedback on a very regular basis to explain to them that they have a role model and teaching them that they need to do the same for the level below. And it's a lot of effort. So it's on one hand, specific processes, specific questions on the hiring part to pick, the most promising people, but it's not finished. Once they're in the company, you need to create this transmission layer of managers. And one level of complexity within this is that we have teams in 10 countries. So the relay is harder if you're not in the same office and if you have different cultures. And so one thing that has been very instrumental in what I am describing is a country manager. So country managers, we hire entrepreneurs or entrepreneur-like people.
Right.
And so they have this training I was describing about culture and values, but they own their P&L and they are local. Otherwise, you don't scale. And then the last thing I would describe is, especially for these countries, for the countries that are, not France because it's further away, lots of people travel there. I go every 3 weeks in a country to share the vision, to understand, to help, to see what I can do, to anything. And for me, for Aurélien, for the Exco, we do that. And I think physical presence is super important.
So many people would challenge you on that, right? It's like, I hear all the time about companies that believe that, you can do everything being remote, right? Obviously, your business is different because it's infrastructure, right? What's your belief on remote work versus hybrid versus in the office?
The main belief, and it's interesting because we have several types of profiles, right? We have out of the 300 people, we have 60 people doing software. But we also have operations people going on sites, driving a subcontractors for construction, and then you have corporate function. Right. So I think you have different types of cultures within Electra. But the main conviction is that we need to spend a significant amount of time physically together because just meeting people at the coffee, getting to know each other it's classic thing, right? It's just something I observed. And what we do is we allow people to have 2 days of remote work per week. But the rest of the time, it's at the office because we want to have this place to share ideas, to create bonds between different types of teams. We do a couple of offsites, one in summer, one in January. All countries do offsite together. We have operations days, tech days, and it costs a lot, but it's not a cost, it's an investment into motivation, innovation, new ideas. And I guess it's quite classic, but we are more in the physical presence matters. Also for success of the company. Also because, work is a social cell, let's say. You spend, 40, 50, 60, big amount of hours per week working.
Right.
And it's super nice to have colleagues, people you talk to, then you feel better, you feel good, then you're more efficient. So things are aligned. Then providing some flexibility sometimes is a good balance.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I like hybrid. I love working from home. I work from home probably 2 days a week, especially when I'm doing content, when I'm doing, these interviews. I'm doing it from home because I have my studio at home and all that stuff. But I love working from an office, and I love working side by side with people because I think you just, you accelerate innovation, you communicate much better, you can go through problems much more quickly. So there's a lot of good things.
The non-verbal communication is
exactly
10 times more powerful physical than
critical.
So completely agree.
Exactly. I agree whole, 100% on that. As we wind down a little bit the podcast, I wanted to touch on something that you and I talked about before we started off officially today, which I thought was very interesting about you and I didn't know about you. But you mentioned something to me that was very interesting. The first is that, for a startup of, how many people are you right now? 200-300?
Yeah, 280, 285, actually.
285. So, one of the things that you mentioned to me was that you guys have 5 or 6 coaches that you work with, on an ongoing basis, across the company. That, you and I were commenting about another inside person that you knew from England who's an excellent coach that a lot of you guys have worked with. And then you touched on, how at the beginning of this year, you kind of decided to proactively work with a coach because you had certain things that you just needed to get some clarity on. And I thought that was very interesting because so often, I get approached by founders or I get approached by investors, and VCs who want me to work with one of their leaders. And 8 times out of 10, it's because the leader is in a crisis or something's going very wrong, right? And I always ask them, like, why didn't you look for help earlier, right? Why didn't you look for guidance earlier? And so talk to us a little bit about that particular instance of coaching. It didn't sound like you were in a crisis, but it sounded like you had to make some tough decisions or you needed to get some clarity. Why did you choose to work with a coach? And
Yeah,
what did you get out of that?
yeah. So I mean, first of all, I can share an experience of the coaching I had, which was at the beginning of Electra. And I can thank my co-founder Aurélien because he pushed me.
Okay.
Basically, what he was saying is, we can see that you don't like to speak publicly. Now I like it, but you don't like it. But you're very credible because you're an engineer. You know what you talk about. People like you. So it's going to unlock value for the company if you speak inside the company and outside the company. And then I met a couple of coaches recommended by one of our investors. And then I had, again, a crush on one of them. 10 minutes, like, okay, this guy is different. I like him. Like, singular way. And then in 3 hours of coaching, not 10, not
Wow.
30, 3 hours of coaching,
Okay.
it was a lot. He pinpointed something really like at the frontier between business and personal stuff that made me realize why I had this like too high humility. And then within 3 hours, I mean, I'm not saying I'm the best public speaker ever, but I switched from like someone that is very shy to someone who likes it. So I found it
Okay.
super powerful, but I didn't know. I had no idea. So my
Wow.
realization currently is more that, in a way, you know, we're scaling so fast. The company is changing. The context is changing. We're becoming one of the European leaders. So the role of the co-founder and the role of the CEO is changing all the time, right? In terms of leadership, in terms of representation is within the company, in terms of public representation. For me, it's more like a sanity check. It's like, it's going well, but I still want to be even better on some fronts.
There you go. Exactly.
And I'm not too sure which one, couple of them, I think. And I'm sure with the right coach, in 20 minutes, I will find some angles. And I want to be like open-minded to that. And that's how I think about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, personal development, if you have a good coach that fits with you, is the best investment you can do for you and for the company anyway. So that's,
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing because it sounds like you had what we call in coaching a limiting belief around public speaking, right?
exactly.
And it seems like this coach was able to ask you one or a couple of questions to challenge and make you rethink that belief, right?
Exactly. To be
Do
honest,
you
as well,
remember what it was? Do you remember by any chance what that limiting belief was around public speaking?
yeah, but basically it was a family thing. Like basically
Okay.
in my family, my father, I'm not going into too much detail, but he was always teaching to shut up and move on.
Okay.
Like no celebration about you know, being very good at school, no celebration about very being a very good engineer. The MBA graduation, they almost left in the beginning at the middle because they found it too American because we were hugging. Like, so it's like unconsciously, you know, even
Yeah.
if you're a
Yeah.
full grown adult, 36 years old, you know, the parent figure is always important.
Yeah.
And I had never realized that I had been conditioned to just do
Wow.
and shut up. And because of something that happened over the weekend, and he pinpointed it, that was really exactly in the same scheme. He said,
Wow.
okay, so maybe that's why. And so, okay, that works. And then for the two next hours, it was like deep diving on this conversation and then sharing
Right.
some tools as well, because
Yeah.
liking it is the first step. And then you need
Yeah.
to train a little bit. And,
Yeah, of
and, and
course.
then, and then it was sufficiently unlocked. So that's
Yeah.
the main thing.
That's crazy. It's crazy how we don't realize how much the influence of our parents in our past can
Exactly.
shape beliefs, right? In a good way and such in a not good way, right? In your case, it was your father telling you, oh, you shouldn't talk, or be quiet, or, you don't want to express your opinions. And then that conditioned you to think, okay, I don't want to speak in public, or I'm not a good public speaker, until your
Actively
coach
and
kind of,
consciously.
yeah, it's really strange how that operates. And we call it limiting beliefs, right? It's beliefs that we have from our past that condition us in terms of the actions in the present. So it's fascinating.
Exactly.
It's really, really
And
interesting.
so today I'm pretty sure I'm not conscious of potential other things. And I want to
Okay.
challenge myself after 3-4 years because the company is a completely different company. That's
Yeah.
basically, there's not
What
much more.
what what um what do you think is a question that maybe you're not asking yourself right now?
That's a hard one.
I love that question.
Yeah, I don't know if I do. I'm kidding. I love it. It's just very hard. It's very hard, but it's a good one because it's forcing me to define an angle with a coach. I think being even better at prioritizing, and that's a very powerful one because my agenda is full all the time, and I go on holiday for 3 weeks, and then I come back with like tons of ideas.
Yeah,
And
I'll bet.
I know, and I've known for 3 years that I shouldn't have a full agenda. I should like make space, to think, to read, to, I don't know, breathe and think about the future and think about, I don't know, new ideas. And my role is COO, it's operations, we're scaling. So I want to, in a way, unlock, make decisions, blah, 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 all the time. And this is super important. But I haven't cracked it yet. So I want to be helped on that. I think
an area there's always areas for improvement, right? I mean, it's funny because I've been coaching now founders for 8 years and I have a coach, we meet every Friday.
Great.
And he challenges me on stuff, and he's a very experienced public speaker. He used to play in the NFL, so he's a former professional athlete, and I'm always thinking about the blind spots that I have, So anyway, we're wrapping up here. Whenever I finish a podcast, one of the things I love doing, Julien, is I have what I call the lightning round of questions, which are basically kind of like 4 super quick questions with super quick answers. So I go through it very quickly, and then we'll kind of like wrap up with kind of a legacy question and close for the day. But my first lightning round question for you is, if you had one superpower, what would it be?
Not needing to sleep.
Okay, all right. This goes back to the productivity. Okay, I get it.
I'll sleep whenever I want to, but only need 2 hours. That would be so good.
Exactly. I can sleep for 30 minutes and I'm fine. Okay, cool. So, the Julien who doesn't sleep. Okay. Question number 2. If you had a magic wand and you could solve any challenge in your company or any personal challenge, what would you solve?
Okay. A very down-to-earth answer, but that would change the company completely. It's the grid situation in Europe.
Okay.
Because it's blocking electrification, including us, and we need hundreds of billions of investment to make it better and to become electrified. And the grid is blocking it. So magic wand, good grid in Europe, no problem.
Yeah, $1 trillion in investment in the grid.
Exactly. Magic wand is cheaper.
Exactly. Okay, question number 3. If you could have, and I think I know who you might pick, but I'm just curious anyway. If you could have dinner with anyone in history, who would it be?
That's a tough one. I need to think about it on this one. It's super. With anyone in history. I think like one of these crazy scientific inventors from like 200 years ago. I'm not sure I know their personality, but someone like Edison or like the Tesla. So the real Tesla guy. That would be.
So I was close. I figured you would guess Nikola Tesla.
Oh yeah, really? Okay, interesting. I had to think about it.
I just thought about it. Okay. And last but not least, the last lightning round question is, what is one personal value that is absolutely non-negotiable for you?
It would be trust.
Trust. Okay. Trust is your non-negotiable. All right. Well, folks, that's our conversation with Julien, founder and co-CEO and COO of Electra. Amazing company, amazing conversation. For me, what stood out this conversation with Julien isn't just the scale of what these guys are building, but it's also the calm, grounded clarity that he brings to a lot of this chaos. Clearly, Julien's not just chasing the spotlight. He's trekking through the terrain, literally and figuratively, building one of Europe's most ambitious EV networks with a quiet kind of conviction, which I love. So, we covered fear, we covered failure, we covered what it takes to lead, we covered, obviously, EVs, we covered the grid and the investment that's needed to make it better. So, guys, if this episode gave you something to think about, share it with other people, reflect on this. Obviously, subscribe to this podcast. And as always, keep going, especially when it's hard. Thank you so much. God bless, and see you on the next episode.